2 whole games. Wow, what a collection. Even then, it's more like 1.5, but whatever. Right, so early 2023 saw the release of a peculiar little thing called Breakers Collection, a compilation of all the Breaker games released onto the Neo Geo back in the 90s from Visco, a grand total of 2 games. The original Breakers release from 1996 that gave you 8 characters to play with, and the follow-up title Breakers Revenge, released a couple years later, essentially the same game with some minor tweaks, a playable final boss, and the addition of a new character expanding the game's roster to 10 whole fighters. 10 fighters in 1998. Quick, play the Mighty Number 9 clip.
It's better than nothing. At least that's my opinion.
There we go. Moving right along. Breakers is a fighting game where you pick a fighter, beat it up a bunch of other fighters, and eventually beat up the final boss to get the character-specific ending. You know, the usual. You've got a control setup comprising 2 punch buttons and 2 kick buttons. You have a number of special moves that can be performed with the usual joystick button commands. A couple super moves that can be executed at the cost of a stock of super beater, of which you could store up to 3. Dashing, throwing, all that fun stuff. Pretty typical fighting game fare for the most part. Nothing out of the ordinary, no real big surprises. If you've played a 2D fighter before from this era, then Breakers is old hat. But it is very good old hat. It plays just fine. Breakers has 3 modes of play, the usual arcade mode, the usual versus mode that can be played against a computer or a second player, and a team battle mode, and that's it. But let's be real here. Breakers the First exists here purely as a glorified bonus feature, and slim justification for calling this repackage a quote-unquote collection. All the fun stuff that people would actually care about, the online play specifically, they saved that for the pseudo-sequel update thing, Breakers Revenge. A title that has all the previous game's stuff but adds a new fighter, makes the boss fighter playable, and sure there's some tweaks to the gameplay here and there, and the visuals have a slight change here and there, but in context to the collection, Revenge sports an online mode for online play. Again, something I haven't tested since I don't do online because I'm not that deluded in terms of how that would turn out for me. So you'll have to look elsewhere for that particular piece of business. Moving on from there, other bits and bobs in the collection include some artwork, achievements for those who care for such things, and an interview with the developers that involves lots of reading, but you could change your reading language, which is nice, I guess. So from a purely content standpoint, Breakers Collection is pretty slim pickings, and really, given that it's only 2 games and one of those games is just an update of the other game, this has about as much business being called a collection as Street Fighter II Turbo on Super Nintendo. You've basically got normal mode and turbo mode. Have fun. Now with all that said, have fun you will if you enjoy messing around with these fighters for shits, giggles, and then somes, because Breakers is actually pretty good. It's a fairly typical fighting game for the time. You've got a number of fighters, they have special moves to do with specific commands, super moves that can be executed after stocking up on Super Beater, there's minor bits like dashing and things of that nature. It's almost an anomaly in that it's a Neo Geo game with the feel and flow of a Capcom fighter, and I don't consider that a bad thing. Honestly, if you've played enough fighters, particularly from this era, Breakers isn't that difficult to get into. The cast of characters feels somewhat derivative, but still a fun bunch to play with. And with Breakers Revenge, you're getting 2 additional fighters added to the roster, and there's some slight tweaks in balancing. It's naturally the better version of the bunch, and again, the only reason you're getting the earlier version is just so that we can call this a collection. I mean, honestly, Breakers Deluxe or Breakers Combo Pack would have been a better name for this deal, or Special Champion Edition, but I guess that would have been too much fun for the social monkeys online. Now, one detail that I do like is how Breakers handles mirror matches. If 2 players pick the same fighter, the second player not only gets the usual palette swap sprite, but they also get a different name. So you don't have Sho versus Sho, you have Sho versus Jin or Tia versus Shelly or things of that nature. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. Is there a trick I'm missing? I don't know. But it is a neat way to explain mirror matches in context, and so I appreciate that little detail. So the way the package is presented is that you have some new artwork for the menus and title screens, which look like new artwork and not something that would have been pulled from art assets from when these games were originally conceived. And since these are basically emulated versions of the original Neo Geo releases, the game themselves retain their original graphical and audio assets, which is nice because the game looks pretty slick, which isn't too surprising considering it's Neo Geo, and they've always had some nice looking arcade titles. A little bit mixed on the audio, the voice bites are fine, the sound effects are suitably crunchy, and the tunes are also fine. Nothing really standout-ish, but nothing terribly offensive either. It's just kinda sorta there. Overall, Breakers Collection exists for some reason. I don't know what that reason is, but you know what? I'm glad it did, because I got to play a game, or two I guess, that I've never heard of or experienced before, and I like them. I will sour on the bits around the games, the lackluster menus, the underwhelming content, but the main meat of the package, the games themselves, are damn fine fighters. Well worth checking out if you want something outside of the usual fighting game wheelhouse, and if nothing else, it will not cost you an arm or a leg.